But before that, that power outage yesterday in Victoria is still causing a lot of problems today. Roughly 250,000 Victorians are still without power. A spokesman from the energy market operator saying it could be days, if not weeks, before power is returned for some. To discuss this, Victorian Shadow Energy Minister David Davis. David, thank you. Labor talks a really big game on renewables at a state and federal level. We see them talk about renewables, but what happened yesterday was it was a handful, I think 6 all up, towers went down. How does just 6 towers going down end up with 500,000 people without power and the state on its knees?
It's actually quite a complex sequence that occurred, but what it exposes is the fragility of our system, the fact that we don't have a robust system and we can't rely on it when we need it. Essentially, the role of state government is to make sure that we've got a robust, secure, safe network that gets the power to people, businesses when they need it. And that isn't what happened yesterday. There was obviously the 6 towers that went down on the big high voltage line between Portland and Melbourne. And this is not the first time that that's happened there. In January 2020, 6 or 7 towers went down in a storm event there. That was investigated and it was found that the towers themselves were not up to scratch. They replaced them with better quality towers, but left the rest of the line without dealing with the long-standing weaknesses in that line. This then, with a range right through the city, there was obviously individual streets and individual suburbs that were hit with trees coming down and other impacts on power lines. But the key event was those big high voltage lines going down, and that tripped the brown coal generators in the Latrobe Valley, both Yallourn and clearly Loy Yang went completely down. And it's only now that 3 of its 4 reactors, 3 or 4 of its generators are back on. Only in the last hour or 2, the 3rd one has come back on. So, you know, we've seen 500,000 people lose power. We've seen load shedding with businesses, huge impacts. I mean, I was out in Clayton and Oakley, you know, middle suburban Melbourne, small businesses, shops, traders, huge impacts on these businesses. They've had to destroy stock. They've had to throw away food and so forth. This has massive impacts on them. And many families, there's still, you know, somewhere between 100 and 200,000 households, maybe as few as 120 now, that are still without power. So that's a disaster. And it points to the fragility and the failure to manage the system. Labor have been there for 9 years. They've had 9 years to make sure that our system's reliable. And if you're going to shift to renewables and put some renewables in the system, you've got to make sure that the system is robust. You've got to make sure that the system is not so fragile that these sorts of events trigger terrible outcomes, as we've seen. And there's people with medical conditions, a whole range of impacts that you can see from this mismanagement.
Well, that's the Victorian perspective, David Davis. Thank you for that.